Welcome to the Wirex Weekly Crypto Podcast, where we dive into engaging conversations with experts, thought leaders, and innovators. And I'm your host, Lianna. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest for today's podcast episode, Anna Censo, who is the Money Laundering Reporting Officer at Wirex. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much, Lianna. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, really happy to have you. Our discussion today revolves around compliance and security in the financial landscape. And we'll explore typical money laundering, cases and how companies tackle them, upcoming trends in anti-money laundering, and so much more, right? And for those of you who don't know, AML is the abbreviation for anti-money laundering. So before we dive deep, Anna, could you tell us about your background a little bit more and why you decided to pursue your career in compliance? It's not the most common career choice, right? What was the aha moment for you?
Sure. After a law degree and a master's degree in business law, I immediately started my career in an Italian branch of a foreign bank. And I discovered the world of the regulatory compliance and anti-money laundering. I have to say that those were years of great expansion and proliferation of the European regulations that detail more and more regulatory compliance in financial institutions. And this was accompanied by the strong focus of all global and European authorities on AML and terrorist financing regulation. Having said that, I have to admit that I was really attracted by this new regulatory focus and found myself immersed in the new system that was slowly evolving and that was becoming more and more interesting, especially in terms of its expansion, not only on a national but also on a European level. After years of experience in the field with both Italian and foreign financial intermediaries, I finally joined Wirex and I started this really, really interesting and new adventure as the Italian MLRO from the 1st of March.
Wow. Welcome to the team, I guess. So what recent updates in the anti-money laundering rules have shaken up the compliance landscape, and how are business adapting?
I will say that the main focus of the anti-money laundering legislation is shifting more and more to cover all the new landscapes and the new players that are now emerging in the market. In fact, we have moved from regulation applicable to traditional banks with branches to virtual currency operators, of which Wirex Digital is a prime example. While also the regulation is becoming more and more focused and centered on the virtual world that is developing now, the light fraud that is the order of the day and the active cooperation of the recipients of the discipline. More and more effort is required of market players in terms of attention and looking at all possible nuances of money laundering and terrorism. And constant updating is required, not only, I would say, in terms of the study of the regulation, but also in terms of the adaptation of all the IT systems.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that more effort and attention is required these days, because everything is getting more sophisticated, right? And what methods do criminals use to launder money? And how do anti-money laundering regulations help combat these activities?
Well, the methods used are now many and unfortunately constantly evolving. I can say that we move from the use of money deriving from consumer fraud with, for example, small sums of money, the so-called money mules, to the withdrawal and conspicuous and constant use of cash, which is very, very frequent and used above all in Italy, up to, for example, large movements of money carried out in particular by companies with parent companies in foreign countries, with, of course, a higher risk of money laundering. But as I said before, the legislation increasingly seeks to follow new trends in terms of expansion and modification of the money laundering techniques. But a great effort is for sure required from all operators, who must always apply in a practical way the best safeguards based on the operation of customers and also on the services and products offered.
So what measures do companies usually have in place to monitor and detect suspicious activities or transactions?
From my point of view, all companies start from a risk analysis based on the different position on the market and, as I said before, the products and services offered. What I can say from my experience is that the construction of the transaction monitoring systems and therefore the analysis of suspicious transactions are for sure tailor-made and are based on the combination of the regulatory requirements and the experience of each company in the main techniques of the money laundering and terrorist financing. Based on my experience in Italy, we have also the help provided by the SIU, which already identifies anomaly indicators based on the type of service provider, the service offered, and the customers. And these indicators are very often used as the basis for the transaction monitoring for the intermediaries.
Wow. So, and how are financial institutions staying ahead in the battle against fraudsters?
Well, the topic of the fraudster, which in fact I have already mentioned earlier during our conversation, is a very hot topic and one that receives a lot of attention from the authorities. I think that starting from 2018, the SIU, in its annual report, highlighted a strong growth trend in reports of suspicious transactions due to online fraud and scams. And the trend has certainly increased during the COVID period, but also post-COVID period. I have to admit that it's very difficult to fight it because, unfortunately, it's constantly evolving, even in the techniques for executing the frauds. I think that we all hear about phishing, smishing every day. And I think that we have probably all received SMS or emails to this effect. What operators can do is certainly equip themselves with a structured team and IT defenses aimed at detecting fraud, built based on a careful analysis of the characteristic of customers and transactions. I think that in this way, it's possible not only to block fraud and scams, but also sometimes to prevent them.
Yeah, it's crazy how so many things actually have to be put in place, right? And it's not just a simple thing, it's pretty complex. How do anti-money laundering standards vary globally, and what challenges do businesses face in meeting these standards across different jurisdictions?
For sure, the AML standards change based on the needs of each country. I will explain better. For example, in Europe, the anti-money laundering directive is in force, then it's implemented in each country with, of course, the modification and the characteristics that the legislator deems relevant. Added to these are the provisions issued by the various local authorities, which certainly have greater awareness of internal problems. I will make some example. Italy is a country which cash circulates a lot and is used for both money laundering and tax evasion purposes. And for this reason, the legislator and the Bank of Italy have always placed a great focus on this theme. The other operators acting in different countries, therefore, have important challenges. as they must implement monitoring and reporting systems that are relevant to all the countries in which they operate.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, to a certain degree, every operator needs to kind of be on the ball, right? Because I can see how things can slip through the gap. So how are advancements in technology like AI and blockchain impacting anti-money laundering compliance efforts?
Well, in my opinion, very often the technological evolution travels much faster than the regulatory evolution. And this can certainly create some doubts in operators who should adapt to developments without a clear regulatory framework. Just as artificial intelligence and blockchains have spread globally without a specific regulatory framework. However, I believe that this ensures that there is always greater awareness and ability in all the people who find themselves working in the AML sector, and that because of their experience, they are able to provide the effort to operators on the market even before the regulatory framework is well defined.
What are the most effective strategies for educating employees and stakeholders about, the importance of AML compliance?
From my experience, I can say that for the purposes of anti-money laundering education, the training for all employees is fundamental. And it is also essential that the training is updated from time to time and based on realistic examples. I think that it's really good to show cases to all employees and the stakeholders so that they can recognize them. Because I think that we too often hear about money laundering, but there are no concrete examples, which all those who work within a company should know to just be able to distinguish any suspicious behavior.
Wow. Because, in some ways, I think of it as like, it's a pattern, right? And if you can recognize the pattern, you should be able to distinguish the suspicious behavior. Can you share any lessons learned or best practices you've discovered through your experience?
Sure. This may seem like a turn of phrase, but through my experience, I have learned that experience in the field is the best weapon for applying best practices that are compatible with companies. I think that it is essential to know the regulation and stay constantly updated. But I think also that to be able to find the right balance between the customer protection and the company protection, let's say, it's essential to know all the company processes and train in the field.
Yeah, I think that's so essential. What surprises and challenges lie ahead in the AML regulations, and how can businesses navigate them effectively?
I think that challenges will not be lacking. I believe that the greatest challenge for each company will be to constantly keep up with the regulatory changes, which will be different depending on the country, the products and services offered, but whichever company will have to face through, I think, three bases. For sure, the technological developments that will have to meet the regulatory growth, a skilled and well-trained shareholder structure, and finally, a corporate culture always capable of change.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. And I think, where we should always be ready to change, right? And to pivot whenever we need to. Thank you so much, Anna. We're really happy you decided to join us as a guest on our podcast. Your thoughts and ideas have been really helpful, and it's really been great having you today.
Thank you very much, Lianna. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And to all our fantastic audience members, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to express your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and until we meet again, stay well.